Hello students, I am Shaila Goel, your psychology teacher. We are doing the chapter of learning and today we are going to understand the concepts of verbal learning. Verbal learning is a different form conditioning, right? And it is limited to human beings because human beings only have the cognitive structure to do this kind of a learning. As you all know that human beings learn by observing, they acquire knowledge about objects, events, and even their features largely in terms of words. Words then become associated with each other, right? And psychologists have tried to understand this kind of a verbal learning through number of methods in the laboratory setting. Now, dear students, each method that is used for this understanding of this learning has some kind of a verbal material, right? And we have used varieties of material to understand this. That those are nonsense syllable, familiar words, unfamiliar sentence words, etc. Now, students, nonsense syllables are those words which have equal difficulty level for everyone, like YOL, YOL. Generally, nonsense syllables include two consonants, first and third number consonant, and the second number alphabet is the vowel. They do not have any meaning for anyone. So the difficulty level of these kinds of words are same for all. Now unfamiliar words are those words which are used very less and they are not familiar to anyone. And familiar words are those words which are used frequently and are very common to our language or the usage. For example, boat. An unfamiliar example is plumb, verb, blout, etc. Right? Now, students, let us understand the first method for studying verbal learning, that is paired associate learning. It is similar. This method is used to learn foreign language. A pair of paired associates is prepared and the first word is used as a stimulus and second word is the response in this. Now it is similar to SS conditioning or SR learning, right? Now what happens is word, okay, first word becomes the stimulus for the second word, right? Members of each pair may be from the same language or the different language. The learner is first shown both the stimulus and response and instructed to remember. Now the list is presented number of times and the learner has to learn the stimulus word with the response word, right? And after that a stimulus word is presented and he has to remember the response word. This continues until the participant remembers all response words without any error. Now students, what happens is the total number of trials taken to reach the criteria becomes the measure of paired associate learning, and this students is different for from one person to another. Now here is an example of stimulus and response. Stimulus is a nonsense syllable gen and the response is loot. The list of four pairs is given to you and you will read it again and again. When I say gen, you will say loot. If you are not able to remember, I will give you the word loot. Then next word I will say bem and you will say time. This process continues till you flawlessly remember all the things. So students, that this shows that the total number of trials taken, that how much early you can learn it, right? And this will help us to understand your learning capacity. The first member of the pair, similar term, are nonsense syllable. That means one consonant, then vowel, then consonant. And the second are English nouns, response terms. Right? The learner is first shown both together and they have to learn it. And afterwards, the stimulus word is presented and the participant has to remember the correct word. Now, second is serial learning. Serial learning is a method used to find out the ways through which participants learn the list of verbal items and processes involved in it. Now, list of items, that is the unfamiliar words, nonsense syllable, most familiar or least familiar words, interrelated words, etc. are prepared. The participant is presented the entire list and is required to produce the items in the same serial order as in the list. The first trial, the first item of the list is shown, after which she has to produce the second item. If the participant fails to do that, then the second item is presented and the participant has to produce a third. That means the first word becomes a stimulus to the second word, right? The second response becomes a stimulus to the third response. The learning trials continue until the participant remembers all the items in a given order. Now, students, what happens? If he fails to do so within the prescribed time, the experimenter presents the second item, right? And this continues. Now, this procedure is known as serial anticipation method. Now, learning trials continue until the participant gives the whole list in the given order only. Now, the third part is the free recall method. In this method, participants are required to speak this list in any order, right? After this, they are required to remember the words, and this method is used to study the kind of organization of words made by the participants in order to store them in memory. Now, students, when we are giving the list, words in the list may be interrelated or unrelated, and the presentation order of the words varies from trial to trial. These are the 2 points that we have to remember, that the order changes, right? It because of this order changing, we can use how a person organizes the words, because they are not in any order, right? The items placed in the beginning or end of the list is easier to remember than the middle, and this is known as serial positioning effect. Now, here on the right side or left side, you can see a list of 10 words. Now, right, when you are presented this list, then if I ask you to remember it, you will be able to remember the last few items very easily, that is book, stream, bottle, because of the recency effect. When asked to recall a list of items in any order, people tend to recall with the end of the list, recalling those items best because they have been presented at the last. They are very recent, and because of the recency effect, you are able to remember that, right? And the second order that is remembered quite easily is the first few words, that is known as permissive effect. Permissive effect is among earlier list items, the first few items are recalled more frequently than the middle items. This is known as permissive effect, because when a person is started reading the list, he is more attentive and the words remain in their mind a lot longer than the words that are presented in the middle order. Now, this study was done by Hermann Ebbinghaus, and this whole effect is known as serial position effect, which is a tendency of a person to recall the first and the last items in the series best and the middle items the worst. Now, students, remember this. This is the recency effect and the permissive effect. Now, what are the determinants of verbal learning? First, most important determinant is the length of the list, and the second is meaningfulness of the material. See, if meaningfulness can be associated with the learning in a lot of different ways. Now, how much time a person takes to learn depends on the familiarity of the material or the frequency of the usage. If the words are being used very thoroughly and very frequently, they will be learned very easily, right? Relations among the words in the list, if they are interrelated, then those words will become a category. and we may be able to learn them more easily. And sequential dependence of each word on the list on the preceding words are used for assessing meaningfulness. Sometimes the first word has a meaning and it is preceded by the second word. If it is some kind of a story where one word leads to the another and the another leads to the third one, then this kind of a learning is easier, right, for some people. Now, what has the length of the list to be learned has any association with the learning, right? If the length increases, the learning time will also increase, right? Now, what happens is, now the more time it takes to learn the list, the stronger will be learning that we have to understand. In this respect, psychologists have found that the total time principle operates. This principle states that a fixed amount of time is necessary to learn a fixed amount of material, regardless of number of trials into which the time is divided. More time it takes to learn, the stronger is the learning. Sometimes what happens is the list is shown very frequently times in a same time period. 10, if we take half an hour, you are shown the list 10 times, it will not change the result. It also is dependent on the time. It will take a minimum time, right? Total time principle operates here. Next is category clustering. See, students, Bosfield is a person who demonstrated this experimentally. He made a list of 60 words that consisted of 15 words drawn from each other or each of the four semantic categories, that is, names, animals, professions, and vegetables. These words were presented to the participants one afterward in random order. Now, what happened? What was the result? The words were presented randomly and the participants organized them category wise, right? The When we were recalling, he saw Bosfield, Bousfield. Bosfield observed that mentally we organize them in the category which he has taken from, like profession, vegetables, etc. Here, category clustering occurred because of the nature of the list. It has also been demonstrated that free recall is always organized subjectively. Subjective organization shows that the participants organize words, items in their individual way and recall accordingly. Now, students, we have to understand that verbal learning is usually intentional. We present you something and we ask you to learn, but it cannot ignore the capacity of unintentional learning or incidental learning. Now, for example, if we are hearing a rhyme on the radio, we can observe that these words are rhyming, or what are the typical letters with which it is being started or something. So, this kind of a learning where we have observed the features is unintentional, it is incidental. It has happened because the things were going on. We have not sat down to understand it more and more or learn more and more. So we can say that learning, verbal learning especially, is intentional as well as it can be unintentional. I hope, students, you have understood and you will do the revision very properly. Thank you, students. Have a nice day.